Welcome everyone to OBIC's Open Banking Insight Series. I'm your host, Michelle Beyo, CEO and founder of Finavator, as well as an OBIC board member. I'm excited to be here today to present our next episode of the OBIC Insight Series, where we're going to be highlighting the B2B as well as the government benefits from open banking infrastructure. As we get started today, I did want to share a couple stats in regards to B2B. In the UK, for instance, open banking is powering innovation that is helping SMEs reduce the impact that late payment invoices can have on their businesses, their employees, suppliers, and their own well-being. The consequences can be serious, as approximately 50,000 small businesses go bankrupt every year, with the loss of over 350,000 jobs due to late payments. Without a fair payment opportunity to provide financial stability, small businesses will not be able to pursue growth. The effect of this on the UK economy is considerable, as small businesses account for over 99% of all private sector businesses. Open banking in the UK has helped to provide solutions that are allowing small businesses to manage their finances more efficiently, provide great choice of innovation across financial services sector, and in Canada, having a similar SME landscape as the UK with 1.2 million small businesses as of January 2019, which is over 97% of our private sector, would benefit from the many opportunities that open banking can provide to these business owners. I would like to start today by introducing our distinguished moderator and panelists. We have the Honourable Senator Deacon, an independent senator representing Nova Scotia. Senator Deacon is a unique entrepreneurial background that has focused on enabling collaboration between research and business, and has a strong advocacy for innovation and consumer data rights. Welcome, Senator Deacon.
Great to be here again, Michelle.
Thank you. I'm also excited to introduce our two expert panelists for today's session. Representing Canada, we have Anne Butler, who is the Chief External Relations and Legal Officer at Payments Canada, operating the Canadian National Payment System. And representing the UK, Simon Lyons, who's the head of the Ecosystem Engagement and Open Banking Enablement Entity, the OBIE. I'd like to start by having both Anne and Simon share a brief intro on their current roles and some insights on Payments Canada and OBIE.
Great, thank you so much, Michelle. It was kind of exciting to be introduced as representing Canada. I was like, oh man, it's like I never did make it to the Olympics, but now I'm representing Canada on this call. So I'm really proud to be here today and speak on behalf of Payments Canada on this very important topic. I'm a member of the executive team at Payments Canada, a lawyer by training, but really representing what I like to think of as a diverse team of thought leaders. At Payments Canada, I have the legal team, the regulatory team, policy, and most recently our industry relations team. So really important thought leadership within the organization. As you introduced Payments Canada, we run the national core payment systems. We currently have two, the high value payment system, the LVTS, and also the retail batch payment system, which is excitingly called the Automated Clearing and Settlement System, or the ACSS, which I always think of as the engine of our economy, with all of the major payments that are exchanged between Canadian financial institutions daily in the ordinary course of business. A lot of that's going through the ACSS. We're in the middle of a really massive transformational project to replace the high value payment system, and it's being replaced fall of this year. And we have a really exciting new program, which is the launch of a real-time payment system for Canada, which we call the Real-Time Rail. And that's now under development, as you may have seen in the news, with vendors on board, with the planned launch in 2022. So really exciting initiative. And why does that matter for open banking? Why am I here today to talk about why do we care about open banking? So of course, it's not the core of our mandate, open banking, but it's very adjacent to the work that we do. And for us, if I think about the open banking initiative and the discourse in Canada, talking about first read-only access being the first priority for the country in terms of getting open banking launched. Part of our modernization program is focused on enabling on all of our payment systems in Payments Canada to support members and financial institutions across the country, the ISO 20022 data standard. So that data standard that's going to have data moving rapidly with payments is now going to be part of the core data that will be available to consumers and businesses within the financial services institutions that house their banking or financial products. So that's a really important part, to stay close and make sure that we're aligned in terms of what's happening moving forward on the data standards that are actually going to be key enablers for the use cases that could come out of a broad framework for open banking in Canada. So that's sort of one key reason. And of course, another big reason is, we talked about phase one. We talk about phase two would be where you get into the types of things you've seen in other markets where you have payments initiation, for instance. Of course, when you're talking payments initiation, we've got real skin in the game. And so we want to be close to understanding and contributing to the discourse around open banking to make sure it's making sense in both phases moving forward to get the most value for Canadians. So that's sort of why I'm here, why I'm interested, and why we as an organization will continue to be part of the planning and coordination of activities in Canada.
And Simon, can you give us an intro as well?
Thank you for having me. My name's Simon Lyons. My title at the moment is Head of Ecosystem Engagement at the Open Banking Implementation Entity in the UK. I'm very, very lucky. I sit in the middle of the first country to adopt open banking, and I have two roles. One role is to grow the ecosystem, which is our sort of commercial angle, to bring banks in, to bring our technical providers in. The other half is the fun bit. The fun bit is where I actually engage industry, and I try to make open banking work through use cases. I think what's very, very important to draw out is I've spent my entire career working as a banker. So one of those people that's out there, and people talk about working in the payments industry or in the data industry. Well, I didn't do that. I work with people who actually need payments or need data as part of their businesses. So my knowledge is very, very much on the ground and empirical. And I really, really focus on exactly what we can deliver. When we look at what open banking is, I think it's one of the greatest problem solvers we'll ever see. There are a lot of problems in banking. If I said things to people like suspense accounts or bookkeeping or shoeboxes full of receipts, or I talked about getting information somewhere efficiently, open banking solves a great deal of those things. It's only because so many problems exist that we can get such a good foothold, because innovation in banking and changing there hasn't been that much of it. You're about to launch faster payments in Canada. Very aware of what you're doing, very familiar with what you're doing. I think that's one of the biggest changes. I'm sadly old enough to have worked on that when it was launched in the UK and was one of the people that brought it in. So the most exciting thing for me about open banking is, number one, how it can embed itself by bringing benefits. You'll notice I've not used any acronyms there, and I've not used any technical terms. It's all about drawing out the benefits. So really happy to talk today, and I'm very, very flattered you had me.
Thank you so much, Simon, for joining us. And I am going to pass it over to Senator Deacon to take it away with questions. I'm excited for this discussion.
I can't wait. And I tell you, that's, Simon, you just nailed it for me. It's all about the benefits to consumers and how we can help consumers and small businesses in particular to have greater insights, better services. As someone who ran small businesses prior to startup companies that had global customers, prior to being appointed to the Senate, I can assure you that I had many a sleepless night wondering when a wire transfer might arrive and if it would arrive in time for when payroll was coming out of my bank account. Well, not mine, but the company's bank account. And the worry about families that you're supporting and getting those checks to clear. And in fact, just last night on our national news, we had a report of around the challenges that Black business owners are facing because of the variability that can occur at the point of the teller, and responsibility and authority, but without the training and guidance, you can get certainly strongly supported accusations of racial bias as it relates to processing of payments, which should be an entirely data-driven activity. So I want to speak to some of those benefits specifically, Simon. And if I could start with you, because that's why we have to go through these regulatory changes in this country. And if we don't keep our eye on that ball, we're going to get more and more complicated and a more and more complex system that actually gets further away, potentially, if we're not careful, from this objective. So can you just just spend a moment, if you could, outlining some of the benefits that have been experienced by consumers. I know this has not been a perfect process of implementation in the UK, and it never will be. But you know, I don't think in any country we'll get to learn. I hope when we finally get started in Canada, we'll get to learn from you. But talk about the benefits for a second, the reason why it's important for us to prioritize this issue.
Okay, you just said something really interesting. And first of all, what I want to say is we're on a journey of benefits. I think one of the biggest problems you've got at the moment is there's a view of open banking that we've launched it, it should be perfect. Well, you know, we used to use MSN Messenger and text 15 years ago, and now we've got WhatsApp and nobody even thinks about sending a 15-minute video. Let's talk about one of the oldest problems that SMEs face, cash flow. We have the same level of business failure in the UK today as we do in 1908. The numbers are the same. Under 2 years, if you can make it past 2 years, it's staggering. I spent 2 years running a cash flow product as well. Cash flow is the lifeblood of any business. Entrepreneurs don't sleep. You saw me smile. It resonated as well. We used to have a tagline that said, sleep at night. Because if you've got the responsibility to pay staff and you've got to pay your suppliers as well, you've got to run cash flow. It is the heart and lungs of any business. If you don't mind your cash, you won't get anywhere. The biggest challenge of cash flow is it's disparate. It's away from the bank. It starts at the bank account. It's absolutely something that's so important. And if we look at it, if you went on YouTube today and you search cash flow, you'd find an Excel spreadsheet with 6 million views. Now, if that doesn't tell you there's a problem there, nothing will, because there's not 6 million videos to fix the lawnmower that I'm just going to try and do at the weekend. So how do we solve it? What's the problems for it? Well, the simple problem is access. So what we've never been able to do is to aggregate, a word I'm going to use again and again, the data from the bank, the data from, I'm sorry if I used the wrong terminology, by the way, the data from my sales ledger, the data from my exposures I've got outside my bank. How do we get all that together? Okay, so let's look at the bank. Now, you just mentioned that you have bulk payments, faster payments, and you have payment schemes. Inside our bank account, there are things that are regular payments. We call them standing orders in the UK, payments collected by third parties, direct debits. We've got our balances. And then what we've got is we've got this other information. We've got a pretty good shift there to get to cash flow. So without mentioning open banking once, you've probably just noticed that we've got an aggregation of data. And the key to that was opening the bank. We already had the aggregation of the other data. We have Wave, we have QuickBooks, we have Xero, they can do all that. We have remittance advices, we have electronic data for that. Let's put it all in one place. Let's solve the first problem, cash flow. Now, nobody's got it really right yet. But for me, I've got one very interesting thing. In the UK, most of the first services that came out were aggregation, and they used to tell me where my spend was. They would categorize my spend. It was wonderful. I was told where I had been for dinner last week and which supermarket I shopped at, where my electricity was spent. That was great. But wouldn't it be great if somebody could tell me when I can go for dinner, when I can afford to go to KFC, when I can afford that? Very rudimental example. But one of the things that's on the table now is this cash flow. Now, extrapolate that, take it further. If our accountants, our trusted advisor businesses, can stop spending time bookkeeping and can start working on advisory, that data suddenly became so much more powerful. We can plan capital purchases better. We can then look at maybe people getting tax incumbents planned. So instead of getting charged 36% for a short-term tax fiscal obligation that was due yesterday, we can plan that because we can do it in advance. There's a very, very good, and Senator Deacon, I apologize for my next words. There's a very good qualification for being a successful entrepreneur, and it's being very, very mean with your money. Yeah. Because if you look after the pounds, you'll get somewhere. And if you don't, they won't. Now, what we've got is we've got this great chance to use it, and that cash flow data is there. Move on a little bit further. What's our second problem? Getting paid. I'm not going to call it late payment because I think that's a very, very sweeping statement as well. But there's a great phrase in the UK, I hope it passes, the check's in the post. So the new check in the post is, I haven't set you up as a beneficiary on my online banking. Now, with payment instruction that we've got in the UK, we just changed something. I can send you a message now. This requires trust. And I can say, hey, you know what, Anne, you owe me $20. And you look at it and say, oh, Simon sent me a message. I've got no excuse now but to pay. Thumbprint, consent, payment gone. Now, as part of that, we could use the identity of the bank account to confirm it's Anne paying me. So I've already proven it's Anne. And also, I could have a legal obligation or a duty of care to say, you know what, I'm not going to take Anne's money unless you can afford it. With consent, I could check Anne's bank balance. Bring that back, I'm going to get paid quicker. Let's put that to window cleaners, hairdressers. Let's put it to mechanics, to gardeners, to joiners, to plumbers, carpenters, to sparkies, as we would call them, electricians. We've suddenly given them a way to pay. And the thing is, nothing's new. What we've done is we've solved a very, very legacy problem. We've taken something that is the same thing. Here's the invoice, pop it through the door, forget that, it's the window cleaner. What I've done now is I've got a QR code, I've got it. We've got to build on the things as well. So I'm not talking about open banking. When we talk about the tax authorities in the UK, we have to think about financial inclusion. Financial inclusion, this is a viewpoint as well. I spent many years working for a bank called the Cooperative Bank. I spent many years working with credit unions. I understand the credit union layout of Canada very, very well. I'm really big on it. I believe in it. I advocate it. I still work with them now as well. Financial exclusion could be considered to be a factor of not having plastic in your wallet. So if you haven't got a debit card, you're going to struggle to go shopping. You know, Walmart's going to be a struggle. Any of the big supermarkets going to be difficult. Tesco or Asda, whatever we've got. So what do? Well, you know, wouldn't it be great if anybody who has a smartphone and a banking app can make an electronic payment with the right details, accurately and timely? Yes, we can. Now, that's what the tax authorities have done. Our own sovereign tax collector, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, is remarkable. There's just no point. I was just along for the ride. My name is associated with it. I was a tiny, tiny crystal of it. They decided to launch this thing with no publicity, no marketing, and a button that says pay by bank transfer. I'll gladly share with your audience the video of it. It's live now. And they launched it for the lowest volume tax in the lowest volume month. And without anybody making any kind of aspersions, there were thousands of payments went through on day one. No questions. But here's the most frightening fact, and the most important above everything else we talk about. There was not one phone call to say, what is this button? And the reason for that was there was trust established between the buyer and the seller. So if I know Michelle, and you know, speaking to Michelle recently, I've told a bunch of people about it. It was a pleasure to talk to her. There is a level of trust between us. So we have to think about that relationship between buyer and seller, and then we can trade on that with the new way of working with people. So I hope there are a couple of off-the-cuff examples that give you the idea of it. And you'll notice I've not used an acronym, and I've only said open banking about twice, because it was all about the problems we address.
You know, if we want to increase productivity, if we want to increase business success in this country, which I hope post-pandemic becomes a priority, then what you're describing is a way to reduce emotional and financial burdens dramatically, because they do weigh on you every night. They don't go away. And too much memory is required, and too much hard work is required. And I want to speaking of the pandemic, I want to look at where we're at in this country, and where you see the opportunity for. Well, we had in the budget the retail payments oversight structure, the RPUF legislation updates. I know it's going to take time to come into force and to be there. But where do you see things changing? Because we just a moment ago spoke about some of the challenges facing many of our entrepreneurs in terms of they just don't know when they'll be able to get access to funds that they know are theirs. And it's that those challenges are really significant, especially when their backs are to the wall. So how do you see things progressing coming out of the pandemic for Canadian small enterprises?
Thanks, Senator Deacon. I mean, I think Simon's points around the struggle for small business, and yours as well, right? That there's a lot of differences between the UK and Canada, but one thing is that running a small business and the challenges are very similar. So I really love the way Simon described that as the ongoing challenge, particularly in a country where that part of our economy is a huge employer, right? A huge part of our economy, and so really important that we take the learnings from the UK. I think the question around COVID is really interesting, because if we look at the research that many have done, including our organization, on what happened in 2020 in Canada, it really tells you quite a strong story about the shift of Canadians and Canadian, like individuals and businesses, online, right? Less cash, less using cards altogether, right? Prepaid cards, less checks, which I'm telling you is an amazing thing for our country, right? To get people, one of the unexpected positives around a crisis like this is it brought the government into focusing really fast on how to get the emergency payments into the hands of Canadians as fast as possible, and a huge push. And kudos to the federal government and the financial institutions that really worked hard to get Canadians getting direct deposit. That was a big difference maker.
That CERB achievement is a big achievement, no question.
It was huge. And it was huge, and it's not just how fast does the money get into the hands of individuals, but it's also around, Simon talked about trust, right? So the opportunity for bad things to happen when money is moving in those in check format, for instance, is higher. And so being able to manage the fraud risk around all of this, as you get a safer, more trusted system, then you have the opportunity to get faster and whether they're consumers or small businesses, being able to know when you're going to get the money, and when you get it, it's good. So I think what I loved about Simon's description is understanding it not in silos, right? That like what will open banking do, but understanding what will open banking do when you add to that some of the things that the government's been doing in terms of trying to modernize how they're engaging in making payments to Canadians, but also what are we doing in terms of modernizing our systems, and how do you bring that all together to provide real value? I think the real concern that I would have is that we lose the momentum. You talked a little bit about retail payments oversight. I'm thrilled to see that mentioned in the budget document last week. There are few regulatory initiatives that have sort of uniform support across the financial sector, and that's a piece of legislation that says, please, can we get payment service providers in the big tent, right? To have that sort of regulatory consistency.
And it took 2 years to get that off the shelf.
It took a long time because for many factors that none of us control. And I think that's but for me, a really important learning, because some of the challenges around moving sectoral changes like this through the Canadian financial system that has the complexity of our concurrent jurisdiction between provinces and federal, it seems to create a drain on being able to move quickly. And I worry about that for all initiatives, including upcoming ones that we have on our deck for expanding membership in our organization. The need to build the sectoral will to drive it forward rapidly is really important. And and I think that's why you see within what you're hearing out of the advisory committee on open banking is to look at what can be done more quickly with private sector taking the lead, and what needs actual regulatory framework. And so I think there's one of the challenges you're not seeing in some of the other jurisdictions that have more uniform, a government that can step in and sort of own all the space. Canada has these unique challenges that could become anchors, and we have to really be focused as an industry around moving forward to get the right solution for us here.
You're talking about the 472 regulators in Canada around financial services. I think I may have missed one or two. I'm sorry, somewhat facetious, but I mean, we do have a challenge around that. And the other challenge is that I'm really hearing in your words is a risk of fragmentation. And I want to shift this back to Simon, if I could, because the UK's try to take one approach, which I think is really important. If you're going to maximize productivity, the productivity benefits and the consumer benefits, I think unifying your approach and focusing on iterating that till you get it right, the journey that you spoke about earlier, Simon, is really important. I wanted to just spend a moment, because I think it's really important, on consumer protections, because there's a thing I find challenging in Canada, that the status quo is assumed to be protecting consumers. It's often put on the table as well. We're well protected with what we have. And I don't feel that way. I think it's the entrepreneur in me saying, no, but we got to get better. We got to get better. We got to get better. And the innovations that have come through the efforts in the UK so far in terms of improving services to consumers, improving certainty around payment management, improving insights around your financial situation as an individual or a small business, empowering you with greater control over making the right decision or understanding you're making a bad decision. Can you speak a little bit about that side of things? Because I think you could provide us with some profound thoughts.
This is an enormous subject.
It's okay. We got a few hours.
Okay, the first thing you've got to do, so one of my focuses when I came in was you have to separate the way you behave in any kind of obligation to, is it in arrears or is it not? And by that, what I would mean is if you buy something on Amazon with a debit card, then you've not got the goods. But if you've got a fiscal obligation, you've got to pay your, I don't know, your house tax that's in arrears, you pay it the month after, so you've got to pay it. So why would you need protection for something you already owe and you've agreed to? Okay, so it's just kind of a binary thing. So I avoid face-to-face. And I have the conversation with a lot of people that say that the consumer protection that's driven by plastic is a corporate, it's a commercial model driven by the cost of that instrument that has evolved over many years from 34 spend categories from merchant acquiring. In when we get to sort of bulk payments, we have BACs in the UK, which is similar to your bulk payment, which is file driven and bulk driven, and you can call those back. There are certain reasons. We have direct debits, which are automated debit collections from corporate to consumer. And there are something called the DDIC, the direct debit indemnity clause, where in certain circumstances you can clause that back. But they're all words. If you get down to the actual real end of it, if I were to buy a mobile phone from you this afternoon, Senator Deacon, I would go to my bank as the last call, I believe. I'm not going to make that as a sweeping statement, but what I would say is I would take it up with the supplier first of all. So I think once again, what we've got to do is have a look at what this trust is between the buyer and seller, be that of data or be that of an item, and then work out in each individual circumstance where the consumer protection is required or is not required. Tax payments was a big focus for me, because there is no consumer protection required in those things. If we look at the benefits of people sharing their accountancy data, there is hundreds of millions of API calls a month to Xero, to Sage, to QuickBooks, to Intuit, to Free Agent, to the platforms here. These people give that consent freely because there is a high benefit for them and they are sharing it with a trusted advisor, their accountant. So I get very frustrated with the blanket statement of, what about consumer protection? Because it's not a blanket in any other aspect of payments. It is absolutely individual and behavior based. And I think what you've got to say to yourself is we got to start somewhere, because otherwise you wouldn't get on a bus. And you know, the flat earthers out there, I'm all good for that as well. But I live in the real world where money needs to flow, business needs to move, and people need to do things. So I'm a glass half full person. There's a way to do it. So if it's basically, we can't use it for, I don't know, for Costa Coffee tomorrow or for Starbucks because I want to know that my, soy latte with decaf is going to be wrong and I want to be able to charge it. Great, don't do that. But let's say we take that another way. What about people with property companies who need to get paid and need certainty of fate, because property is going to be one of the biggest sufferers of COVID? It's going to be brutalized. Office space. Would you want to be owning office space right now in the middle of a city? No, you wouldn't. So give them a bit of certainty. If it's an insurance payment for your car and you have to make that first down payment for the underwriting to take place, for the policy put in place, why should that be protected if you've agreed to it? As long as it's a fair and proportionate amount to the policy, why should you have that? Now, the secondary payments, that's completely different. But now we're suddenly in a world where we can do both. We can have the schedule of payments or the schedule of data. Certain ones are exempt, certain ones aren't. I think the point to get back to is this. Open banking is built on something called standards. And I admire highly my colleagues in standards, from Chris and Imran and the colleagues I work with, Alan, bloody good job. I'd love to think they knew what they were doing when they said it was going to be standards driven. Most other regulation in banking that I see never gives anybody a bottom line or a top line. It just says what you do wrong. So it's like sort of taking a free kick and being told off as well. Suddenly we have an entry point. Go above this and everything's fine. Whereas when we look at global regulation like FATCA, financial avoidance on the transaction as well, it was, well, is this in PCI DSS? I can't put this data in. Well, you can in this, you can't in that. It was very grey. The standards gives you the chance to start somewhere and then build on it, as you say.
Well, I think the important thing that I'd offer to that is that it allows you to innovate to get even better all the time.
It does.
And that's, I look at our success in AML activities in the world, and we're 99.8% successful in helping criminals to move money through our AML activities in their current form. We're 2.2% successful in catching those funds, according to global studies. So, the reality is current systems have to take a fundamentally different approach. And that's where I think open standards are so crucial. And the risk of fracturing those, and if government doesn't show leadership, you get a whole bunch of voluntary standards potentially coming in, and you don't have that unification that allows the whole economy to innovate. And your thoughts there, just quickly.
You've got to look at population is how you're going to get it there as well. So it's all well and good having a standard. If nobody uses it, it doesn't make any difference. Betamax and VHS, classic example. Betamax was a far superior standard. My wife's a television producer. VHS won. Blu-ray. We can go through lots of examples in society where it didn't win as well. Your majority will sit there, and if you set those standards, and the thing that you want to remember is you're enabling other data to be used with it. So when you set your standards, what you have is some flexibility, integration, and that word again, aggregation. So let me throw back your 98.2% Bitcoin, untraded, unsettled currency. Problem. Just chase it back to Hawala, which is the way that you can move money in a certain way. It's very clever. There is no trace of it as well. Now then, what about if we had to identify every person that was sending a payment at some point? Not at every point, at some point. So I want to go and buy your service, go and do it. Well, let's make sure then that in our standard, we can identify somebody to the fullest extent, name, address, zip code, social security number, postcode, whatever it may be. It doesn't matter what it is. But what that gives you is scale, and it gives you scalability. And the thing is, if there's enough applications, I always work from the use case. I have no interest in the technology. I only have the interest in what it can be applied to. If you work from that use case and say, I want to give Michelle $100 a month, but to do that, I need to know a bank account's not changed, invoice fraud gone, done, CEO fraud. I want to know that she's got the same telephone number so I can verify it. I want to know her email address, whatever you want. And then when we establish that once, what we've done is we just solved, nobody can solve all problems, but we've just done something that's got commercial value and consumer value.
Love it. I just love it. And I'm going to swing back to you if I could. And I just, Simon's given us some great examples of and I think a really important way to look at open banking. What, from your standpoint, what do we have the most to learn doing right and doing wrong from what's gone on in the UK over the last 8 years?
So many opportunities to learn from the UK, right? So I think that, firstly, I love the conversation about standards. I think that's a really important thing for us to be learning what worked well, and what were the learnings to, if you got a do-over, how would you do that differently, or how are you changing it? I think standards is absolutely critical for the reasons that both you and Simon talked about, and because we started off a few minutes ago talking about the challenge of how long it takes to get some of this regulatory change in, right? We need to have in this space tools that govern the behaviors of the participants that can evolve quickly over time to meet the market needs, so that we're meeting the needs of end users. And I think that's an important thing to think about. I think Simon's advice about thinking about the end users and the use cases is really important, because you can't solve everything, and you need to have a focus on what actually is going to be of most valuable to us in Canada to make this most effective. I think the other learning from the UK that I find really interesting that Simon is talking about too is thinking about, when you think about use cases and thinking about trust, is understanding where are the gaps in trust that you have to be able to build as part of your standards, right? You want a consumer or a small business or anyone participating in the services to trust the system, so that you're not having to do due diligence on every provider that you're using, right? And so how do you build a model that lets me as a Canadian say with confidence, you heard Simon saying, I trust to push this button, I trust the participants in the system. And I think we're still in early days in Canada to build that broader, the broader ecosystem to support that trust. We have pockets of, kind of incumbents that have built their trust system, and we have not yet built the one we need for a broader access to the data, I think. So a few thoughts for me from what I certainly learned looking at UK and listening to this conversation.
Well, I'm gonna do my final two questions before I hand things back to Michelle here. And Simon, we've learned so much from you today, and I really appreciate the one point you just made about how we could improve at least the basis of information available to start to do a better job at AML. You know, just small insights like that. But can you just leave us with your key points of advice? Just think of me as a rather thick politician who you've got to tell me again. Tell me what you told me. What are the key pieces that Canada should not forget? Lessons learned from the UK that Canada's got to keep front and center in mind as we try and get this issue moving in this country, try and get the moving towards better consumer-directed finance.
Okay. The first one is there's no perfect. You can regulate and plan forever. You can walk around. Nobody's ever done it before. What we're actually building here is an API economy. Okay, so eBay have got it, Facebook got it, Amazon have got it, MuleSoft have got it. We share data every day. Go on Strava this afternoon, go riding. Go on Pokemon. It's not Pokemon, it's Google Maps. You know, nobody's perfect. They built that, it worked, and it works slowly. Start somewhere, quick. Just don't think about it too much. There are no experts. And the reason why there are no experts is if there were, these problems wouldn't exist and we wouldn't need APIs. So don't believe them. I think that's the biggest message I would give about your standards body and how you would do it. I think I would definitely look at how you energize your ecosystem. So in open banking, we bring in the participants, we call them TPPs, fintechs, and we bring in banks. And what we found in the last year is that the big corporates have got a big role to play because they have population. Every fintech wants population. Every bank has population.
Gotta have users.
You gotta have users. You know, there's no point. And you know what? You want to go out on there and talk about cost of acquisition of users, and I've seen them all price it and you give up because to get users you need trust, and we don't trust anybody with our money. The classic example of that is if you look at where everybody banks, you'll find out a lot more. So think about who your audience is that both will consume the service and who can gain the service, who can distribute for you, who are they? So you've got, is it Tim Hortons coffee in Canada? Is that a big chain?
I think they exist, yes.
Right. Well, I've got a cup from a trip a while ago, and the name just came back to me as well. So, you know, Tim Hortons got all these customers that go in there every day, and a QR code on the cup that will let people make a donation to charity, which is what we've got over here at the moment. Somebody did it. It's so important because it's getting that word out there. And then, oh, it's Tim Hortons, I trust it. Now then, if it was Simon's coffee shop that's just come from Manchester, no bugger would give me a cent because they wouldn't trust me. And it's so important, that trust element. And I think the other thing I would look at as well is it needs a starter pack. So if you think about bringing in an electricity company, or, you know, I don't know if you have people who make manual payments, and we have things called SMEs meters here where people top them up with cash, they're financially excluded as well. So those electricity companies have got a population that can really benefit from open banking. We're doing that in the UK now. And it's something that we're working on as well. We're trying to replace cash machines. We've got cash withdrawals from shops coming without an ATM. There's a bunch of stuff we're doing as well. But what you got to do is you got to work out who are those people that can influence and bring you people in. And have you got that technical hub where I'm the Canadian Water Company and I can knock on the door and go, hey, Senator Deacon, Anne, I want to try it out. But I want to try it out without having to go through 3 months of procurement with a business, signed up, get committed to a contract. I want to turn it on tomorrow, and I've got an innovation team with $100,000 to go try it out. And then I'm going to go to all these lovely fintechs you've lined up, and I'm going to spend my money with them. Because the try it before you buy, the POC thing, is vital. It's just vital. It's so important. But do you mind if I just give you three anecdotes to give you the example? We all pay tax. I'm pretty sure of that as well. So one of our government's obligations that we want to do is I want to know who paid me and how much they paid me. So this is my tax record. We call it the full payment submission in the UK as well. One of the things we're doing with open banking at the moment is this. We've got about 40% of the population can't access a tax regime for the information. And because of COVID, our Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, last week made a speech about fintech. Lord Holmes, one of our lords in the House of Lords, made a speech. He's a very good colleague of Imran's, about how we've got to embrace fintech as well. One thing's come out of open banking that for me is the greatest attribute. You can probably tell I'm not a person from a regulatory background. I'm definitely not. I'm in a pseudo regulator. We've got the payment regulator in the UK called Pay UK. We've got Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. We've got Her Majesty's Innovation Fund. We've got me, which is from Open Banking Representative, and we've all got together and we all sat around a table and had very, very heated debates sometimes and very frustrating debates. But what we found was this: we can solve a bunch of problems without spending hundreds of millions of dollars. We can spend a couple of $100,000 and produce enterprise solutions, because the biggest benefit that open banking and open banking standards deliver is the ability for my big business to say, here's what I want, you all go build it and you commercialize it in the market. And that for me is the crux of what you've got. So why don't you just before energize it, give them a start point, give them a way of adopting it. But what comes from that is the ability for you to solve some serious macro problems. And I can say that with authority because I'm standing in the middle of it right now. A little bit longer, apologize talking too much, but as you probably tell, it's one of my vices is talking too much.
I'm thrilled to listen to you all day long, Simon. It's great, and I really appreciate the insights. And we're now probably one of the slowest countries in the world in terms of our movement on this issue. We need to take Simon's advice and get started. We have a challenge that many of our big FIs have very old tech platforms that have not been kept up to date. We've got regulations that are still, we don't have the stated objective of updating our regulations. How do we get things moving faster? What's your advice as somebody like me? How do I do a better job of engaging? How do you think we can get things moving faster in this country? Because it's clear you're passionate on this issue, as I am. You see the benefits to consumers and to small business in particular. You see the benefits to the overall economy. Where can we start to
tax and not payments? So the biggest use that you've got for the data, and it's the data that grew first, was the provision of bank statements to accountants and for lending. Now then, if you think about a principle, right, let's forget open banking again. I want a loan, and I'm a bloke that runs, I live in the hills, as you know, as we mentioned earlier, talking beforehand. I had a chap that dug some holes for me. He's called Jack Roebuck. He's a lovely man. And he just started out in business. He's 24 years old. And he went to go and get himself a digger because his old digger was dumb. He could afford the payments because he was earning enough money. Could he get credit? No, couldn't get credit. So I got involved. I was like, you know what, Jack? I'm going to find someone with open banking. And so what we did was we found out that actually there was a company that would use his bank statements to give him a credit rating based on his bank account, not on his missed payments, not on his credit score, not on his mortgage payments, not on his all those things. So now just think about that. That means he's not had to use his profit and loss account. He's not had to use his balance sheet. He's not had to have a history. They just looked at him and said, you know what, Jack? We looked at your 3 months bank accounts. Well, good. He's got a £150,000 digger now. He's got a Libre 75, which I've had a go in, which is wonderful. Right, now then, here's the most important thing. We just turned a maybe for a lender into a yes. And that means, and I'm sorry to say this, and I apologize to all the people on the consumer side, we just made money for somebody from open banking. Mm-hmm. So if you gave me, on a completely empirical and personal level, said to go is that I'd be going on all the lenders and all the asset lenders and saying, okay, guys, what do you need to make better decisions on lending? Because you got 40% of yeses, you got 20% of maybes, and you got 40% of no's. I want to turn your middle 20 into yeses. If we provided the bank statement, would it do it? Go further. And then suddenly what we've done is we've solved the biggest onus of businesses. Bookkeeping, the least pleasurable task on the earth. Allocating the right receipt to the right ledger, purchase ledger, sales ledger. What's the VAT reclaim? What's the tax? Oh, yeah, I don't want to do that. I dig holes. You know, I'm a banker. I don't want to do that. Then we solve that. Then we give Wave. You know, one bank builds one automatic feed and builds one API. RBC, whoever it may be, BOM, whatever it is, they build one feed to one accountancy platform. I'm not advocating those names. And you've suddenly set the precedent. And from that will come benefit, and from benefits comes everything else.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and I think if I could pick up on that one, Senator Deacon, I think that Simon's really nailed it. I think the reality in Canada is that even the financial incumbents now see, they're investing in this. There's an understanding of the value from, as Simon said, right, it's value for consumers or value for the businesses, but it's also value for the companies that can provide the services. So there's a business case for it. And you're seeing, at least my observation would be seeing that momentum building in the private sector to support this. You asked about what do we need in Canada to keep the momentum going. And to me, we do need leadership.
Or to get it.
or to get it. I think of Michelle and this group and others who have really been building that momentum. For me, I think there's there's a will to move it forward within government. It's challenging for some of the reasons I spoke about earlier because of the complexity of the Canadian environment, but there really needs to be a champion, right? There needs to be a real champion of this, and it's a very, very complex, collaborative environment that you're going to need an organization that can navigate and bring to the table and create collaboration to get to the standards that we need to run this effectively in our country. And that's what we need here, I think, to make this work.
And I think the willingness to iterate is going to be really, really crucial, as Simon has said. But Simon, I do have to hand things back to Michelle because I know she's going to want to ask a couple of questions, and I've done a terrible job of managing time, but I have loved the conversation with the two of you, and I'm very grateful to have been invited. Simon, thanks for your insights, and very much you as well. And I'm going to hand things back to Michelle.
Thank you, Senator Deacon. Such a great discussion and so important. I think I'm also a business owner. I absolutely feel this same pain, currently screen scraping to access Wave infrastructure and then going down every 3 weeks because the screen scraping breaks. And I don't have an opportunity as a business owner to have 99.9% uptime to facilitate my monthly infrastructure, and I'm not the only one. I feel so jealous to look to the UK and know that they've got an infrastructure that not only allows them to choose where they send their data, but have the ability to revoke it if they so feel that they don't want to work with a party anymore. And that's what we don't have for our 5 million Canadians who are trying to access fintechs today, those still wanting to work with our incumbents as their core banking, but want to access Wave or Coho or Wealthsimple or some infrastructure that is going to help them save. And I know we only have a couple of minutes left, but my question goes back to taxes, because I am at the OBIC, with our 80-page manifesto, trying as an organization to be to bring everybody together. This is not a zero-sum game. Everybody can win from open banking. It has been proven in Australia, in New Zealand, in Singapore, Mexico, Brazil, the UK, and onwards. The UAE, we are the last of the Commonwealth to make a move. And maybe taxes are the way we can bring this up to government in a different perspective. So Simon, with the last couple minutes, can you potentially share with us high level the amount of added tax payments that have come in this new initiative? And Anne, I do know some small business numbers due to the challenges we're having of collecting taxes. So maybe those two numbers combined can bring us to a different discussion in the Canadian government about why open banking matters. Simon?
So sadly, open banking doesn't have the remit to increase taxes yet, but we are hoping that we can do that at some point in the future. What we can do is address something which is of an aged position. So, the fiscal tax in the UK is, I think, 830 billion a year. And we paid a lot of money because a lot were paid by debit card and a lot were sent by instant payments that Anne is launching currently. And people quoted the wrong reference. So let's look at the two values. There's three distinct values, actually. Number one, we'll reduce card fees. And that means we get tax payments without interchange. Good, that's great. That was the goal. That was the short-term financial goal, which gave it to us. But then what occurs is a little bit more. So how many people send a tax payment with the wrong reference? So they send a tax payment, it goes in the wrong ledger, and they end up, that's a real problem. Now, that's a seriously high overhead, right? That's a lot of work. That really is. And the biggest thing is it settles in about 8 minutes. Instead of 3 days it takes cards to settle. I'll give you a great anecdote. If you, Senator Deacon, Anne and I were having a beer 20 years ago on the beach, and we said, Simon, in 20 years, it's going to take 3 days for a card payment to get to the merchant. And if I use direct debit in the UK, the automated one, it's going to take 10 days to set up that mandate. Well, that's exactly where we are. So if I look at the problem we've solved for our tax authorities, we've given them certainty of money, we've given them a reduction in fees, and we've given them the chance, irrevocable payments, which are actually a benefit in this case. I can't quote you the numbers, but what I will say is the benefits case that was written for and that it was meant to realise, I get in trouble for this, but we're going to far exceed it. We are going to far exceed it. We really are, because we're solving some really old problems. So I do hope that at some point in the next couple of years that OB can raise taxes, because we can then, you know, do all sorts of things. If we can have an OB tax, it would be wonderful, but not something I would advocate or support. But I hope that gives you a good picture.
It very much does. Thank you, Simon. And in the last minute, anything you'd like to share in regards to maybe the potential you could foresee within taxes in Canada?
Well, I think the description of what's happened in the UK is so informative, and I reflect on what's happened during 2020 and the COVID crisis. Actually, our tax authority, so the Canada Revenue Agency, was a real leader during, you know, and it seems funny to say that, right? Because nobody usually says positive things about the tax, but they really have invested in trying to make big change to get off of paper into the digital economy. And, you know, if you're looking for champions of value for new payment systems and for open banking, it's a great place to look. I mean, I think there's some really great thinking going on inside that department. I also think the learning around having good use cases that shows value. If you're thinking about the framework that's needed to support this, you need champions that aren't just bankers and payment service providers. You need to have stories that resonate politically, and that's small businesses, that's individual people who elect parliamentarians in this country that make laws. And so, you know, I think focusing on, you know, real use cases that will make a real difference to the business people in our country is going to be critical, and I'm excited to see that discourse starting in this country.
Thank you so much. Such a lovely discussion, and so powerful being a business owner and wanting Canada to succeed in the sense of how we help those 97% of Canadian business owners through open banking. So thank you so much, Anne and Simon, Senator Deacon, as always, for this discussion and insights that we can share with Canadians. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.